Gen X went pretty hard for Trump, but interestingly, there was also a big shift in the youngs, the under 29s, or sorry, the under 30s. You see plus 15 from 2020, plus 15 change towards Trump from 2020 among under 30 men, and plus 7 among women under 30. And then, you know, there here it is visualized a different way, which really
Yeah.
also kind of draws out how dramatic the gender gap is in this demographic in particularly. They both shifted pretty significantly towards Trump, but we've got
Yeah.
men under 30, 14 voting, roughly 14 points in favor of Trump, and women under 30 voting roughly 18 points towards Kamala Harris. I, first of all, don't know how healthy that is for the young sexes to be so far apart on these political questions. But what do you make of kind of young shift towards Trump this election?
Oh, I think it's totally fascinating that this is happening, right? And you saw in that first chart, right, that the younger women also move towards Trump, and I think it's just a function of
Yep.
younger voters. Like I don't necessarily know like there's a particular group identity right there. I think it shows that Trump's appeal to younger men worked spectacularly, where Harris's support for towards Harris's bid for younger women did not work. And in
Mm.
particular, I think, it really is this you do really see that, Dan Cox at AEI has done so much work on, particularly this question of the Gen Z gender gap. And I think you clearly see that actually manifesting in election results, which is like huge validation for that theory. But in particular, I think there's been a shift among young people towards Gen Z, towards Republicans. That's a hugely underplayed story as we talk about the minority voter realignment towards the GOP. I think that the fact that we are now Gen Z and Gen Z and millennials are now within 10 points nationally, and in an election where Donald Trump, who is supposed to be the devil incarnate for these groups, is the candidate. I mean, Obama was winning these groups was winning young voters at the time by 2 to 1. And in every election, basically since, the plus or minus has been, oh, the Democrat's going to win young voters by 20 points. So the bigger than expected shifts, a lot of it has to do with the economy, with the changes that have happened since the pandemic, with inflation, which is frankly hitting voters like really hard in the pocketbook. And who's going to react to that more? It's not going to be
True.
seniors, right? Seniors you saw barely moved in that. Seniors are pretty secure financially, typically speaking. So they're not as affected. They're getting their cost of living increases, right, on Social Security, right? It's young people, right, who probably bore the brunt of pandemic job losses and career disruption and all the things. What's fascinating from the Democratic theory of the election is what did Joe Biden do? Joe Biden actually did something for these voters. He tried to cancel their student debt. And that's something that actually came up in focus groups a lot. People like actually remember that.
Hmm.
And yet they didn't vote. They didn't vote for the Democrats. Like
No.
the Democrats tried to bribe the voters, and the voters didn't accept the bribe.
Do you
Well,
think if that hadn't gotten reversed, maybe we'd be
there's
experiencing a different
there's
story?
some
Yeah.
frustration, but people actually did. The people we talked to give them
Yeah.
credit for it. So it's just really interesting because it was an issue because all the Democrats are running around saying, we gave them all these goodies. We give out all these goodies, like we spent all this money, and they weren't grateful
Yeah.
for it. But
It's
what
interesting.
you did in the process of giving out those goodies is you lit the flame of inflation,
Yep.
which really hit everybody, right? Now,
Yeah.
you created some jobs in a desert in Arizona building chips or manufacturing chips, but everyone in the country had to pay the price for that.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's a very interesting point. I'm working right now on a documentary about the rise of Javier Milei in Argentina, and he was fueled at he got broad support across all sectors of Argentine society, but he was initially fueled by young people for many of these same reasons because they are the ones that the inflation obviously much worse there, but they're the ones that feel a lot of the brunt of it as they're getting started in their careers. And they were also the ones blamed for going out during the lockdowns during the pandemic. So that's an interesting idea that there's this sort of pent up frustration among young people that expressed itself in that way. We also saw, like, I'm curious about the sort of podcast game, because young people that's the podcast listener demographic, and in their final
Zach, I
days.
feel like you're erasing my mom, who is the number one Joe Rogan fan. Like, whenever I hear people be like, "Oh, Joe Rogan, like that's a podcast for like young men," I'm like, I'm pretty sure my mom listens to that
Yeah,
while she cleans, like literally
yeah.
every day.
She
And I
she
like
might be an
Rogan and
outlier.
Theo Vaughn
Yeah.
and stuff like
Yeah,
that too,
you
you
might be
know?
outliers though, because I mean, you wrote about this, Liz, that we had the kind of Kamala Harris goes on the Brene Brown podcast, Trump
And
goes on the
call
Joe
her
Rogan
daddy as
podcast,
well, which
and
is
call
another
her
like sort of
daddy.
edgelordy young woman. I mean,
Yeah.
really, I think probably the issue is Kamala Harris didn't go on Red Scare. That's
Right,
probably the thing that we can
that
chalk her
was the
loss
sort
up
of,
to.
yeah. Yeah, but she also, like, she said she was gonna go on Joe Rogan, but then said only if he flies to her and does 45 minutes. I mean, in retrospect, should she maybe have just, gone to Austin and done the Joe Rogan? Like, could that have helped in some way?
I'm not sure she should have. I mean,
Yeah.
and I think there's a reason she didn't. It's, I mean, if you look at her, her performances in unscripted settings where she's just kind of
Mm.
shooting the breeze, I don't think she was capable of doing that.
Well, she does that for The Breakfast Club with Charlamagne tha God, right? But it's a little bit less of a hostile
It's yeah,
sort
it's
of
a
it's like
little. I mean, I think he would have been in the crosshairs in the firing line, answering. I mean, he has off the wall topics that he likes to ask about, and she's just not comfortable, right? I
hmm.
mean, she's extremely under. I think was extremely nervous about doing these interviews. It took her 2 months to ramp up to do any interviews at all or have any kind of earned media strategy at all. It was all like kind of paid advertising and rallies and speeches. And in the sense of every single time, there was like a big interview, she was off the trail for 2 days preparing, right? Because, and you would think that as a candidate, once you get worked up, once you're sort of, in the groove, right, you can kind of do these things. But it was very clear, and she did okay in the debate. She had 5 days to prepare for it. But, I mean, she, towards the end, she was strangely absent from the campaign
Mhm.
trail when she had to do the Fox News interview and she had to do like a series of town halls. We asked a question right towards the end of the election in our final survey. What event stuck out to you the most from the election? And the number one thing by far was Trump's visit to McDonald's. Right. So the number one thing by far
Really?
that required no scripting. He's just acting completely naturally. And then when he went on Joe Rogan, he's just shooting like again, it is who he is authentically. I don't think we ever got a sense of who she was authentically.
Hey, that was a clip from Just Asking Questions. You can watch another one here or the full episode here. And if you like what you see and what we do, please help us launch our new channel by subscribing below and get notified whenever we post new clips or full episodes. Thanks.